This is just so ridiculous, these councils. It was originally a guidance written in 2020 for the makers of Barbie, Mattel, you know, those toy makers. And the company has since removed this mad advice from its website, but councils around Britain seem to be sticking with it. So the proposal is that white kids playing Monopoly should be given more money and less jail time so that they understand what it's like to be white, but they already are white. But I mean, this is just insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we see stories like this now on a weekly basis, things about white privilege or anti-racism or gender ideology infecting our schools, our councils, our institutions, you know, and I think we've become a bit desensitized to it. We think, oh, it's just more woke nonsense. But actually, when you look at this stuff, it's so sinister. It's actually teaching children to be racist. It's encouraging racist stereotypes of white children and black children. It's essentially saying that all black, it's essentially saying that all black people are poor, which is a racist stereotype. There's loads of wealthy, successful black people. And it's saying that all white children are born into wealth or born with money. And we know that actually one of the poorest, most impoverished group of young people growing up in the UK today is young white working class boys who have some of the worst educational outcomes and living in some of the most impoverished parts of our society. So it's all it's going to do is, if it was implemented, is build resentment, build division between children, and actually corrupt the innocence of children, because children generally don't see race. It's only until they get older that they become aware of society and our racialized thinking. Actually, it's encouraging a racialized thinking within children that actually isn't there. And it's very disturbing that the councils would adopt this. I actually just think the fact that they've taken this from a Barbie manual guidance just shows you that they are just so dumb. I mean, they're willing to just sort of when it's actually it's just vile.
In fairness to Mattel, the toy makers, that company has removed this advice from its website. But as I say, I think it's 4 councils at least around Britain are sticking with it. And you make a good point there, Amy. In essence, this is racist. Yeah. It's racist to suggest that all white people somehow or other have more money than people of colour. It's also racist to suggest, you know, that when white people are in the dock, they are automatically given less jail time than people of colour. And, you know, old people, adults, you know, they tend to be depressingly stereotypical like this. They too tend to characterise people, caricature people almost. But as you say, the beauty of children, the innocence of childhood, they don't see colour. And here we are imposing these awful, stale, outmoded adult prejudices on innocent kids who actually, before we pollute them, know better than we do.
That's right. I mean, and these guidelines were written for children for as young as 3-year-olds up to the age of 12. So it's very, very young children. And it says they want to encourage children to become anti-racist allies. Essentially, I mean, this is like something out of the Cultural Revolution, like indoctrinating children from such a young age. Children don't have to be allies to anything. They're children. They should be playing games in a normal way without any ideology infecting the game. And I think it's very interesting that they've gone after Monopoly, because Monopoly is a game that's about buying property, it's about wealth, it's about, I guess, capitalism. Yeah. And we know that many of these so-called anti-racists, actually, underneath it, they have very strong socialist or communist leanings. And I think that's why they've targeted this game, actually. But the idea that they would want to put their politics, their adult politics, onto a young child, I think to me, it's almost like a kind of grooming. It's really corrupting. It's just grotesque, and it just shows you how captured our councils are, that they would allow this in. I mean, this is what we pay our taxes towards.
You know what's interesting, Amy, is I mean, this feeds into a syndrome that destroyed the Tories. The Tories stood around, they were asleep at the wheel while this woke ideology consumed more and more and more of our culture. This is one more example. Now, these wokies, these woke warriors, I mean, what they really are is they're left-wing, they're anti-capitalist, they don't like our culture, and the Tories just acted like there was nothing to worry about. Well, what they allowed to happen under their watch was basically the changing of our society. And I think, I don't know what you think, but I think it's time we started kicking back at this. It's time we started fighting, because there's no common sense in this. And actually, I think it's probably dangerous. This pollutes children.
Yeah, I mean, none of these ideas have any evidence base behind them. Actually, all the evidence goes on to the contrary. All of the unconscious bias training, for example, has been totally debunked.
Yep.
And there's a lot of evidence that shows when you
discredited, totally discredited.
Yeah, totally discredited.
And there are still schools that practice it.
Exactly, yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, I think it's devastating that this happened under 14 years of a Conservative government. But unfortunately, we've now got a Labour government who I think will increasingly push this stuff even more. And that's a depressing thing.
Yeah, you're right.
It should have been stopped under a Tory government. But now I think we're going to see more and more of these stories.
It's going to get a lot worse. Amy,